Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Migrant arrivals continue at our border, but there are changes to how they're being processed. Thanks for joining us. I'm John Carroll in for Maya Trabulsi. Earlier this month, the county approved $3 million to help migrants and asylum seekers with various services, including transportation to their sponsors. KPBS reporter Alexander Nguyen tells us how that money will be doled out.
Busloads after busloads of migrants and asylum seekers are being dropped off by Border Patrol agents at the Iris Transit Center in Otay Mesa. So far this morning, volunteers have been helping more than 100 people who've been processed by U.S. Customs and Border Protection and dropped off here.
If you need a ride to the Greyhound bus, let me know.
Most of them are going to elsewhere in the U.S. looking for their families, but they're being dropped off without phones that work. Their phones are dead. Their batteries are dead. They have nowhere to go. They don't have access to Wi-Fi. They're just being left on the streets by Border Patrol.
More than 13,000 migrants have been dropped off at transit stations throughout San Diego since mid-September, taxing local aid organizations. CBP were releasing migrants in San Diego because shelters were full. The county called it an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. Earlier this month, the County Board of Supervisors approved $3 million to help ease the strain. Last Thursday, South Bay Community Services, or SBCS, was awarded the contract. Supervisor Tara Lawson-Reamer says the organization will act as an umbrella organization to distribute the funds where it's needed.
But they're not doing all the work. You know, there's a lot of groups out there, immigrant defenders, El Otro Lado, there's just so many of them doing amazing work. And we imagine they're all going to continue to be partners in providing these services.
According to county officials, SBCS was awarded the contract because of its experience handling the unaccompanied minors shelters at the convention center in 2021. Local nonprofits told KPBS they're still working out the details on how the $3 million funds will be distributed. For now, CBP says it will only drop off migrants at the Iris Transit Center, making it a centralized location where asylum seekers can get the help they need. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
It's been 12 days since a woman died in one of Customs and Border Protection's makeshift migrant camps, and humanitarian workers on the ground tell KPBS border reporter Gustavo Solis that conditions have not improved.
It was inevitable. If you are putting migrants in open-air detention sites without access to food, water, or medical care, eventually someone will die.
Erika Piñero is the executive director of El Otro Lado. Her organization is trying to provide basic services to hundreds of people being held in the Yacumba and San Isidro camp. Earlier this month, a 29-year-old woman arrived at the San Isidro camp, which is outside and has no protection from the sun, rain, wind, or any of the elements. Border Patrol agents say they noticed she was winded, but she declined medical aid. Within 30 minutes, she was unresponsive and had no pulse. She was declared dead at Scripps Mercy Chula Vista later that morning. This was the first reported death at any camp. Volunteers set up a makeshift memorial for the woman, decorated with colorful flowers, candles, and messages of hope. Still, Border Patrol continues to tell people to wait in these camps so they can be processed to enter the country.
But the open-air detention sites in Yacumba have continued to grow. We have not seen Border Patrol regularly handing out water. We've still had to call 911 multiple times a day for very serious medical emergencies. And so, again, nothing has changed.
Humanitarian workers like Pinedo are frustrated by the lack of local leadership on this issue. They haven't seen any elected officials publicly pressure CBP to improve conditions.
The city, the county, the state, the federal government all point fingers at each other to absolve themselves of responsibility for these migrants who are coming to seek protection on our soil. And what ends up happening is that no one takes responsibility, and it's the migrants themselves who suffer.
Congressman Juan Vargas has previously called for an investigation into the migrant camps. He was not available for an interview. San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria did not respond to a request for comment. Neither did County Supervisor Nora Vargas. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
As the death toll in the Israel-Hamas conflict continues to climb, investigators in Michigan are searching for a suspect and motive in the murder of a prominent synagogue president. Laura Aguirre reports while authorities have not linked her death to anti-Semitism, the case shines a light on growing concerns over potential violence in the U.S.
In a world increasingly polarized by politics and prejudice, the sister of Samantha Woll wants to know who would kill a woman known for loving everyone.
You fought for everyone, regardless of who they were or where they came from.
Samantha Woll, a synagogue board president and prominent Jewish community member, was found fatally stabbed outside her Detroit home Saturday. Detroit police gave an update on their investigation Monday.
We have a number of people that give us interest. We are just short of calling one of the people a suspect.
As of now, police say there's no evidence anti-Semitism was the motive. Still, national security officials are voicing concerns that the escalating war between Israel and Hamas could spur increased violence in the U.S.
We remain very concerned about the lone wolf incited to violence by an ideology of hate.
Near Chicago, the mother of a 6-year-old boy stabbed to death last week is herself now home from the hospital, recovering from her knife wounds. The family's 71-year-old landlord is charged in the case. Police say he allegedly attacked them because they were Muslim, and a federal hate crime investigation is underway. Illinois' governor making an appeal for peace and unity Monday.
To show our Muslim and Jewish neighbors that we stand with them, to chart a new course, one of solidarity, justice, and humanity.
I'm Laura Aguirre for KPBS News.
As the war between Israel and Hamas continues, there are concerns a wider conflict in the oil-rich region could further tighten global supplies. Coming up, industry experts explain what impact the war could have on American wallets. 20 healthcare workers with Kindred Hospital walked the picket line today. Pharmacists, technicians, and clinical lab scientists kicked off a 3-day strike this morning. The hospital employees joined the National Union of Healthcare Workers earlier this year. They say after 4 months of negotiations, Kindred Hospital still has not addressed staff shortages or demands for better compensation.
Currently, we get paid about 2/3 of what any of the other area hospitals make, and they haven't kept up with inflation. They haven't kept up since COVID and all that. It's, just a strict 2% raise every year, which for a technician making $20 an hour or so doesn't really add up.
In a statement, Kindred Hospital says it submitted a proposal to union representatives earlier this month, but has not received a counter. Kindred says it is committed to continue negotiating in good faith. SAG-AFTRA says it will hold its next round of negotiations with major studios tomorrow. It's been 3 months since Hollywood actors took to the picket lines. The two sides are reportedly at odds over several issues, including revenue sharing, salaries, and the use of artificial intelligence. Last week, some of the biggest names in the industry, like George Clooney and Tyler Perry, offered to pay higher union dues to help end the strike. Clooney says those higher dues would bring in about $50 million a year, allowing the union some breathing room in funding the benefits it offers to members. Last week, the city of Oceanside voted to limit the amount of units a developer can build in the downtown area. The city says this will preserve their beach town feel, but KPBS North County reporter Tanya Thorne found housing advocates say Oceanside is going against state housing law.
Oceanside's downtown is currently the most sought-out area for development in the city. It's the proximity to the ocean, transit, and entertainment that make the area attractive. But last week, the Oceanside City Council voted to put a limit of 86 units per acre a developer can build.
This is our opportunity to say what is a reasonable development. What is a development that we are actually seeking out to continue the development in our cities?
The new cap is double what it was in 2019. But state housing laws pushed council to remove it and give developers unlimited density. This led to the approval of larger and denser developments in the downtown area at market rate. Oceanside Mayor Esther Sanchez says denser market rate developments with only a handful of affordable units don't meet the needs of Oceanside residents.
We need low and very low. We don't need other units. That this is not really meeting our needs, which is why we need to build affordable housing projects. I know that there's a ton of money, and that's the reason why we're stuck in this Sacramento decides everything for our city.
But state housing laws restrict city governments from denying projects, no matter the density or rate.
On the surface, the city's trying to break state housing law.
Matthew Lewis is with California YIMBY, an organization aimed at making the state an affordable place to live and work. He says Oceanside could make up for the limited housing in the downtown in other areas of the city, but that would need to be outlined in the city's housing element plan submitted to the state. And Oceanside's plan is still under review.
If they don't have a certified housing element, then they're taking a pretty big risk, reducing capacity, something that we have seen cities do and not get away with.
He says the state and attorney general are now keeping a closer eye on the city's finding ways to cut denser housing.
That the longer we continue to prevent people from living in places that are desirable, where there's also already existing infrastructure, existing services, schools, roads, etc., the more we force those people to live further and further away in places that are actually still pristine, and they still have to commute all the way back to the coast because that's where the jobs are.
Lewis said it would be better if cities viewed dense housing as a positive thing because it leads to economic growth, more middle-class income, and less homelessness. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
There's a growing wait list for the city of San Diego's latest safe sleeping site. The city opened its second safe sleeping site over the weekend. It's located at the O lot at Balboa Park. It has 400 tents and can fit up to 800 people. The organization managing the site says they've already brought 17 people there and identified 150 more in need of help.
There's a waiting list of people who want to get into our second safe sleeping site at the O lot, and we're looking forward to getting hundreds more people off the sidewalks and into a safer and healthier place. We want to make sure that we're getting people who are a good fit, who agree to abide by the rules and allow them to get settled in.
The organization says it will enroll unhoused people into the site every day until they reach capacity. Councilman Whitburn expects both sleeping sites to be full in the next 2 to 3 weeks. San Diego researchers say public criticism could be a major tool to get countries to comply with climate-friendly goals in the Paris Climate Agreement. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson has details.
Many of the world's climate negotiators think making countries accountable for their international climate promises would be effective.
I'm here to appeal to all parties to rise to this moment and to
a recent paper finds that withdrawing from the agreement, trade embargoes, or even military action are seen as counterproductive, expensive, or unrealistic.
Each country every 5 years makes a pledge. Here's what we're going to do. And the naming and shaming mechanism is a way of looking and seeing whether the actions on the ground are consistent with the pledges that they've made. And if they aren't, to then call out those countries.
The Paris Agreement was adopted in 2015, but the pact has no enforcement mechanism.
Countries with really strong institutions, those are places where naming and shaming is most likely to be effective.
Emily Carlton says that would be countries with stable governments. Researchers surveyed nearly 1,000 climate officials who regularly attend the UN's yearly gatherings known as the Conference of the Parties.
This agreement was the outcome of all the countries coming together and having to all agree. And so this is the best we could get and still maintain that kind of broad, widespread consensus. And that's the fundamental challenge of consensus diplomacy, right? Is that it can only be as strong as the least ambitious.
Officials also say the approach would work best if criticism comes from a non-government organization instead of another country. The findings are published in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
For the 7th year in a row, San Diego County saw its agricultural output grow in 2022. The county released its annual crop report today. It shows the ag business here grew by 1.4%, or $24 million in 2022. Our county is the #1 producer of nursery and cut flower products and in the number of organic producers statewide. Avocados had the biggest spike in value of any crop, rising from just over $82 million in 2021 to $123 million in 2022. The Israel-Hamas war shows no signs of abating, and that means concerns are growing that a wider conflict in the region could further tighten global oil supplies. Gloria Pazmino explains what this could mean for prices at the pump heading into winter.
Israel's military ramping up its aerial offensive against Hamas as the war enters its 3rd week. And now, growing concerns of significant escalation in the region.
Well, we have seen some worrisome attacks, and we got to do what we got to do to protect our troops on the ground, particularly in Iraq and Syria.
While neither Israel nor Gaza is a significant oil supplier, concerns the conflict will broaden to other countries in the region are driving investor fears of a possible tightening on global oil supplies.
Especially if Iran gets involved. Iran is a major oil producer, and if they embargo oil or cut exports, that could weigh more heavily on oil prices.
Brent crude oil prices opened at above $91 Monday, the international oil benchmark. So far, the fluctuations have not impacted gas pumps.
A lot of the seasonality that's pushing prices down is really winning that tug of war, and that's helping to keep gasoline prices declining, even as oil prices have gone up.
Patrick DeHaan with Gas Buddy says cheaper winter gas blends combined with decreased demand are helping to keep prices low.
The national average now below $3.50 a gallon for the first time since July 5th. And by later this week, the national average could fall to its lowest level since March.
In New York, I'm Gloria Pazmino.
The federal government just gave California more than $1 billion to improve hydrogen fuel facilities. Hydrogen is seen as a crucial part of any zero-emission energy plan in the fight against global warming. The only emission that comes from burning hydrogen is water. California is one of 7 hydrogen hubs nationwide. The U.S. Department of Energy is expecting the hubs to create hydrogen fuel production and distribution networks. Tyson Eckerly is one of the state officials who will administer the program. He says California must build a so-called hydrogen ecosystem that makes it more plentiful and easy to distribute.
What our ecosystem does is balance that, the supply of hydrogen with demand. And so the key to launching a hydrogen market is really getting to scale. And so the more we can scale across sectors, the stronger this ecosystem will be. And hydrogen is really exciting because it helps us get to the really hard to decarbonize sectors. So we can get to 100% carbon free by 2045 in California, which is our mandate.
In its application for federal funds, California focused on using hydrogen fuel for heavy-duty vehicles, power plants, and ports. But hydro-powered cars will also be a part of the picture.
I'm meteorologist Michelle McLeod, and I'm giving you your weather headlines right off the top. It is going to be chilly tonight, and if you thought that was just the night, unfortunately, it's going to continue to be much cooler air, and the dry weather, it's going to persist. We had a pattern change, and so remember last week, it was nice and warm, but your highs are going to be 15 to 25 degrees lower than this time last week. It's all because of this jet stream dipping all the way down into portions of California, almost to LA, but not all the way to SoCal. But I mean, the steering winds definitely lower than San Diego. So into even Thursday, you're going to continue to see much cooler air where you are. Now, your overnight lows closer to the coast, you're going to see them in the 50s, struggling to get in the 60s. I mean, San Diego, you get a little bit of an uptick in temp from that urban heat island effect. And as you head into the mountains, you'll notice those overnight lows will be in the 40s. perhaps trying to get in the 50s, seeing increasing clouds overnight. Here's what I'm talking about with the futurecast. Check it out. Those clouds are going to make their way onshore. And so in the morning, don't be surprised if the commute, if you get in some areas of patchy fog, don't be surprised about that. But tomorrow, you know the deal. Things are going to turn bright and sunny with those temps in the 70s. You got wind coming in from the north, helping to cool things down. On Wednesday, things are going to turn a bit breezy when you head towards the mountains, but the name of the game, mostly dry. So for the coast, here is your 5-day outlook. Dry, sunny, but cool. Cool inland as well, seeing those temps in the 70s. On the decrease as you head into Saturday. Mountains, a bit cooler for you, turning windy by Saturday. And desert, 80s, lots of sunshine for you.
From Cardiff to Leucadia, Encinitas is chock full of color and culture. It comes in the form of murals and other public art pieces. KPBS reporter Jacob Ayer looks at this North County beach town's public artwork.
As you walk, bike, or drive along Highway 101 in Encinitas, it's easy to spot dozens of murals. But that wasn't always the case.
There wasn't murals around. I had the whole town, man. I did so many murals around here, down in Cardiff, everywhere.
Kevin Anderson would know. He's been a longtime North County resident and was one of the very first artists to paint murals in Encinitas. He explains how it all started.
1995. So what's that? Almost 30 years. And I started right on D Street in Encinitas at a little Hawaiian restaurant, Keilani's. And that was my first mural in Encinitas.
His work hasn't slowed down since. The 66-year-old is constantly creating private and public art pieces across North County. He stands in front of a large mural he recently painted in the Leucadia neighborhood and describes why public art pieces like his matter to a community.
They're like windows, beautiful windows to look through, that you see something that you don't see every day. It takes you out of the typical mindset of driving down the road. You're walking down the sidewalk and you're thinking of all your thoughts, and you look up and you see this giant mural and you just go, wow. It just takes you away for a minute.
There used to be just a few murals in Encinitas a decade ago. They've now blossomed into an abundance, with many public art pieces focused on the environment and different cultures.
As you go further down,
you can see them along Highway 101, some in plain sight, and others tucked away like hidden treasures.
He said he wanted to do some sort of memorial wall for them, and so that's what this is. And then his dog is Ollie, Zavishla.
Irene Pion is executive director of the Encinitas 101 Main Street Association. She says some of the murals started as a project to reduce crime in an alley. Over time, they helped make Encinitas into an arts hub.
Ultimately, what it has done, without us really knowing, is that it has really inspired a lot of artists, local artists that can do large murals like this, to come down and see downtown Encinitas as a location for art now.
But what spurred the push for more public art in the first place? Encinitas Friends of the Arts president, Naime Woodward, says it was one piece in particular back in 2011.
and then Surfing Madonna happened.
The mosaic showing the Virgin of Guadalupe surfing was originally installed under a public bridge on Highway 101. Woodward says it challenged the very notion of what is art versus graffiti, and it gave a voice to the artists in town.
It brought a lot of conversations in the community from every angle, and that was music to my ear. Very uncomfortable at times, but I think it catapulted the mural programs, and it just, again, put Encinitas on the map.
In the decade plus that followed Surfing Madonna, there's been a wide range of new artists coloring Encinitas, which is a welcome change for the seasoned veteran Anderson. He says watching the growth of public art in his hometown has brought him great joy.
If you look around Encinitas now, everywhere you look, there's murals. And a lot of them are painted. So in the last, 10 years, they've grown exponentially. It's become something.
There have been some creations that have stirred up emotions and controversy. A few public art pieces in town, like the Surfing Madonna, received a lot of pushback.
Some of them were offended because they couldn't figure out why Mother Mary or Guadalupe would be on a surf. But once it was explained, because Save the Ocean, that surfers are using and tapping into that divinity to save the ocean, they embraced it.
Pian says she wants even more murals in her town to further push its public art scene.
We do want to add more murals for sure, but we also want to be a lot more mindful of it, because the more and more murals you add, we want to be more purposeful of what they are and how it kind of sends or tells a story.
And Woodward wants to expand beyond murals.
But I do encourage people to see some of the sculptures, hopefully the ones that are going to go up on a temporary basis. There are 5 sculpture pads. They're coming.
After decades of work and countless brushstrokes, Anderson's vision for an art-filled city has arrived, weaving a large and tangible tapestry across his hometown. His influence is undeniable.
I wanted to live in a world where it was like art was like really important, and art meant something, and in a world where I could actually show people my art.
Now his murals are spreading into other cities across San Diego and California. And with them comes a little bit of the essence of Encinitas. Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
Some cool stuff there. To see more in the series, go to kpbs.org/publicart. Thank you for joining us. I'm John Carroll. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. By viewers like you. Thank you.